What's up, Navigating Academia family? This is your buddy Dr. J. Phoenix Singh coming at you to be able to discuss some fascinating findings from a good friend of mine, Professor Tess Neal. And Professor Neal is down at Arizona State University. She's a Fulbright scholar. She's currently abroad. And it's just absolutely fantastic. If you love forensic psychology, you want to learn more about it, you want to know about folks who are really at the cutting edge, then please do follow Tess. Her Twitter handle here is at Tess M.S. Neal. That's N-E-A-L, okay? Highly recommend following her, especially if you love anything about forensic psych. She does a great job also retweeting other leaders in the field as well. So if you really enjoyed this video, definitely follow her. So here we go. This is some new data from a survey that Tess and her colleagues did. And this is about a topic that so many people are fascinated by always, which is anything having to do with money. So in this case, let's go ahead and read Tess's post. Tess says, "Curious about how much money forensic psychologists make? We were too. We wanted to know whether there were gender differences. We did a survey, so the N, which means the sample size, was 376 respondents to be able to find out." Okay, so this is the thread with the summary of the findings. So the first thing here we can take a look at is, again, so 376 people responded. A test says below, as we'll find out, that the response rate was about 21%. And to be honest with you, for a digital survey, that's really good. And in terms of how she ended up finding these respondents, she says, "We compiled a master list of potential participants by searching state licensing databases for psychologists and collating their contact info." In other words, collecting it, organizing it, and so forth, okay? And then they sent an email invitation to around 1,800 psychologists across the United States with forensic interests. And out of that, they got that response rate of 21%. Like she says, decent response. Trust me, I've done digital surveys. Her team did an awesome job, okay? And so the average hourly rate charged by psychologists for forensic work is $280.23, and that's in US dollars, right? Now, the standard deviation is quite wide here. It's about $108, okay? But both the median as well as the mode in terms of what is charged is $250 an hour, okay? So men charge more than women, about $300 relative to $258, okay? But the difference is not statistically significant after you control for years of experience. Now, I would say, just in terms of off the top of my head, in terms of mediator and moderator analyses, and I haven't read the full report from Tess, but that information could be included in there. I really recommend that if you're interested in learning more, you look at that report. I'll show you that info in a moment. But the first thing off the top of my head would be, where are these individuals living? So, for example, if there were, let's just say, more men in California who responded and more women in, let's just say, Oklahoma or Idaho who are responding, where the cost of living is significantly less than in California, at least right now in 2021 when I'm making this video, that could potentially explain it. I love that they controlled for years of experience. That's really important. There are a lot of mediators and moderators that I would say are super important here. That just whether or not the individual is a man or a woman does not account for. But based on the literature, definitely in a multivariate analysis, taking a look at wage differences between men and women, you do see the gender is one of the contributing factors to that. So I think that this is really important work that's been done. So if we take a look here in terms of a visual distribution, we can see here that we've got kind of a right skewed distribution where we do have, even though it's a minority of individuals, really getting paid quite a bit of money in terms of their hourly rate. Now remember, guys, if this is something where you are just kind of starting out, or you're using this data to say, oh my gosh, I'm going to become a forensic psychologist, and right out of the gate, I'm going to be charging $250 to $275 an hour, because this is what it looks like most people are charging. This would be very, very abnormal. Take into consideration that when you have, let's just say, a startup company, it's going to take you 3 to 5 years just to be able to kind of even get it off the ground. Some people obviously luck out, and their first year is phenomenal, right? For me, for my first company, it took me about 2.5 to 3 years until I really hit my stride. For my latest company, Publication Academy, that's one where I really knew what I was doing because I had had a similar company before, even though in a different space, as they would call it in business. But because of that, I was able to really just from the jump succeed with my company. But obviously this is something different. We're dealing with kind of hourly consultation work or hourly forensic work, things like report writing and so forth, investigative interviewing, mental state examinations, you name it. And so this is incredibly important work. It's incredibly specialized work as well. If you want to get involved with an organization that it really represents forensic psychologists, at least in the United States, I would recommend Division 41 of the American Psychological Association. Division 41 is for forensic psychologists. It's called the American Psychology Law Society. Some really wonderful people involved with that, okay? So next thing here the test says is total annual income of forensic psychologists. And this is their income, not including a partner or just their entire family, right? Family income, right? In US dollars was a median of $125,000 to $150,000, and the mode was $100,000 to $125,000. Again, you can see the distribution here. And so essentially 8% of the sample in terms of it's like, oh, we've got this little, curvilinear thing going on. Not quite, because this is basically just more than $350,000. So realistically, we can assume that this would kind of right skew its way out if we just continued having these different bundles of, 25,000 going kind of onwards and upwards. Okay? But you can see here, I mean, even if we're just visually looking at this thing in terms of just individuals' incomes, really most folks are kind of clustered here between $50,000 and $150,000, which is arguably a really wide range, right? But keep in mind that out of the 300-ish respondents or 350-ish respondents, it looks like about 50 of them, right? So like 1 in 7 were making between $50,000 to $100,000, right? Which even though that is not, let's say, $125,000, still, let's say that you're just getting out of grad school and you're making $50,000 to $100,000, that's really quite good. I'm just saying, right? I remember my first postdoc, I was making $40,000 the first year. I got a raise the second year to $41,000. Look at me, bling bling over here. But yeah, so, being a forensic psychologist is definitely a field, where you can do well. It's a lot of hard work, understandably, all things in life, obviously, that are worth doing or worth doing well. So you'd want to work really, really hard if this is the route that you'd be interested in going, right? But this is some really awesome data. So down here, we have more gender analyses. So Tess says men's income was significantly higher than women's in forensic psychology. So here we're dealing with income, not hourly rates, okay? Even controlling for experience. So that's really interesting, right? So men's median income versus women's median income. Here we can see about a $50K difference in terms of just if we're dealing with those ranges there, okay? And the men's mode, right? So most common income was 150 to 175K, and for women it was 100 to 125K. Okay, so that's what we're looking at here. And this is a really great graphical representation of that. And essentially here, what we can see in terms of count is I'm making the assumption because it wasn't broken down earlier, at least in this thread on Twitter, in terms of how many of the respondents were women and how many of the respondents were men. So it seems like there were significantly more women who responded than men. In terms of to the digital survey. But of the men that did respond, there's clearly a very disproportionate number also over here on the right-hand side who reported kind of being in this max out category. But luckily when we're dealing with, something like the mode, for example, that is going to at least partially adjust here. And obviously when you do have this kind of data, you're really looking at the median being more useful than the average. And so I think it's awesome that we have median and mode-based data up here, okay? Now we've got employment type and money, right? So if you were in private practice, this is where you can make quite a bit of money, but take into consideration, at least in the US, this is gross income of the, presumably gross income of the private practice if they're in private practice alone, and we don't know that, right? So take into consideration that you're going to have a lot of costs if you are in private practice. Many things, rent, insurance, utilities, I mean, like you name it, right? There's going to be a lot more fees. And also in the US, you're also going to have to take care of your own payroll taxes. And that is a massive pain in the butt, right? But that's private practice, okay? And again, no, it's not something where if you start a private practice, day one, all of a sudden you're making 200K. right? This is something that takes a long time. This is one of the reasons why it would be fascinating to take a look at kind of the total report itself. And again, I'll give you the link for that. Tess does such a great job. She's an amazing writer as well. So it's certainly the case that you would want to read that full report. She's so thoughtful in her analyses and all, and I am very confident that everything that kind of I'm mentioning in terms of what I would want to learn more about, that she has taken into consideration already. She's very thorough. So this is me just spitballing in terms of, gives you some insight also in terms of how I look at data, when I read it. Okay. Next thing is institutions, right? So prisons and hospitals, medical centers, so on and so forth in terms of where they're working, right? 125K to 149K, right? Relative to, private practice, people are getting paid more. If they're working at a university, it's lower. So 100K to 125K for the median. Oh, sorry. That's not medical. That's just median. Sorry, shorthand. And then other things. Okay, so we won't worry about that. Again, here's a graphic representation of that, again, broken down by primary place of importance. Now, if you're interested in learning more about this, right, take a look here at osf.io/42REW. If you click on that, it's going to open a new tab in Chrome, at least if you're using it, and you can go ahead and download the report if you wanted to. If you want to read it online in this little viewer, you can read it here as well. But this is going to give you a lot more information, higher resolution versions of all of the graphics and so forth. And if you're a stats nerd like me, as you can see, you're going to have a really awesome breakdown of the data. So anyway, big shout out to Professor Neal, all of her wonderful work in the field of forensic psychology. If you're interested in being a forensic psychologist, again, I recommend that you check out the American Psychology Law Society. One thing or whatever people ask me about is in terms of, programs, can they learn more about which programs are in forensic psych versus not? American Psychology Law Society also has a graduate school handbook, which is online in PDF form. It is awesome. If you Google around a little bit, you can find it. And that's going to provide you with information on essentially every APA-accredited forensic psych program at both the master's and the doctoral levels in the U.S., both PsyD and PhD. And that is just an absolutely invaluable resource. So I do recommend checking that out. All right, guys, have a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.